Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamer Dad channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So one really crazy thing that I've noticed is how much I don't necessarily engage in 100% of what the Division has to offer. Now, that sounds crazy because I'm a Division content creator. I've been making content since the Division 1, but I'm here saying this. And for some of you, you already know what I mean. I don't PvP in the Division, so that is already a huge part of the game that I'm not necessarily touching. Now, this also has implications with it because as much as I love the Division as a game, I still, in a sense, don't engage in the PvP because I don't necessarily think that its systems really appeal to a part of my brain in a sense, and I'll probably get to that later on. So when it comes to the PvE, I'm necessarily the 100% fan. I'm sold. It is my favorite shooter game, if not the only shooter game that I play consistently than any other shooter game. Any other shooter game that I like, I play once, I beat, I drop, or maybe I hop back in from time to time. So you can throw the Far Cry games on that list. You can add Metro Exodus. I'm looking forward to playing Prey. I heard that it's actually a very good game, so I'll go ahead and play that. It's on Game Pass. And don't worry, folks. Yes, I heard. I'll play it. And then, you can actually throw some of the Ghost Recon games in there as well. But largely, PvP in a lot of these shooter games, I don't necessarily engage in. And most especially, the shock to me is that I'm not necessarily engaging in the Division game PvP. Now, this has also been a very interesting cycle as well because the PvE community to me, I think, is what the Division was primarily developed in focus of. They focused in the fact that they would have a huge PvE community or just a community of gamers that wanted to run around, deal with the game, explore, conquer missions, get commendations, all kinds of things. And I think the PvP side was more of a minimal aspect. I think it was a very niche idea that doesn't necessarily seem to capture a lot of people. Now, for those that the PvP has captured, they will tell you that the Division PvP is the best thing in the whole wide world. And, I have to sit here and just nod my head and say, sure, great, amazing, awesome. And many of you are my friends. Many of you are really close to me, and you can't even deal with me right now. You're even giving me the hand through watching. I can even see you giving me the hand. You're just like, talk to the hand because you're here again, and I get it. I get it. So something that really stirred up this conversation was last night I was playing Mortal Kombat 11 because that's where I PvP. And, once in a while I'll pick up the game. And then once I pick up the game, I go on this run where I'm just playing. I'm just enjoying myself. I'm having fun. And, even one of our audience members here and even Buddy on Twitter, we've even run some Mortal Kombat games, together. And one really cool thing that happened was last night I was playing and I match made with someone. I mean, just, it's a random matchmaking system. And I recognize the gamer tag. I'm not going to mention the name because if I do, many of y'all are going to know who this person is. They actually used to cover the Division before, and so we were playing this game, and they beat me at the game. And I was like, man, that's crazy. And they even disrespected me, so they didn't even know who it was. They don't know who I am. I know who they are because they started doing YouTube way before me. They're kind of like a bro in a sense, and so they were clowning me in their on their stream. So I went on the stream. I was like, yo, you basically just disrespect me. They're like, yeah, I don't care. I disrespect everybody, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, okay. So I kept playing, and then I match made with them again, and I beat him. So after beating him, he was like, oh, is this you? I was like, yeah, it was me. And I was just messing around, basically acting like a stream sniping troll. And then I was like, I wouldn't even do stuff like this in the Division. Why is another game appealing to me in this aspect compared to the Division game? So it was kind of a shocker for me that I would rather engage in PvP and actually go all in, go all out with a whole different video game than actually do so in the Division. And I think this is the idea that kind of caught me, off guard, because as much as people will say the Division PvP experience is actually pretty solid, I strongly believe that the way it was implemented in the game itself is something that has, in a sense, hurt the game. So what I mean by that is a lot of people that play Division PvE, even though many don't touch PvP, some of us still PvP in other games. Some in sports games. Some of us will play 2K. Some will play FIFA. I used to play FIFA before. Some of us will play fighting games. Some people in our community are almost professional fighting games player. Not me. I'm an amateur, like straight up. Some people here are really, really good at playing fighting games. But, Division is just one of those games that they engage in because the mechanics and everything's pretty cool. And some of us will also play other looter shooters as well. But if you kind of think about it, the entire premise of the Dark Zone, I strongly believe could have been done in the context of a whole separate entity in a sense that didn't affect the overall game. So what I mean by that is the Dark Zone should have been much more exclusive in a sense that would have actually allowed for that experience to be rich, deep, and even customizable to a larger extent. So if you think about it, the Dark Zone does affect the end game and affects the PvE world in a sense. And what I mean by that is your player progression and your player power can be affected by the Dark Zone if you make your way in there. Now, yes, the disclaimer is given. If you go in there, it's a no man's land. All of these things will happen, but many people were not necessarily operating well under that premise that somebody can basically turn around, shoot you, steal your loot, or if you put your loot on the extraction, they can cut it and take all your loot, grief you, and all of those things. So a lot of people just naturally gravitated away from it because of all of that. Because in a looter shooter, the idea is that you gain and garner loot to progress yourself. Losing the loot to another player in a sandbox that's designed for you to lose your loot is antithetical to the farming game. And so, yes, as many may say, well, you went in there and it's a risk. You also have to remember that for the longest time, the Dark Zones would hold exclusive items that, even though they were exclusive into the Dark Zone, could be beneficial in PvE as well. So people were, in a sense, forced to go in there and take the risk. But at some point, getting met with frustrations, it just necessarily didn't, pay off. And even sometimes people will go into the places like the Dark Zone. I think there was this one, when the Division 2 came out, there were a few items that were basically Dark Zone exclusive. And people would go in there, and once they got it, they would never set foot in the Dark Zone anymore. Some people will go in and try for those Dark Zone exclusive items, like the Hollow Man mask. At one point, it was basically a phantom. And once they got it, they were out of the Dark Zone. And because of the nature of the way it was set up. So I strongly believe that things like conflict, the reason you see our content creators and you see some people still going into conflict, even if it's not as, I would say, broad, or it doesn't have the richness that the Dark Zone is supposed to have, they still play those modes because people are much more willing to go in there because you're risking being killed by somebody else and losing a game mode rather than losing something that can affect your player power or progression. That's where the issue is. Now, even in Mortal Kombat 11, when you're playing the seasonal PvP games and you're trying to progress to get the loot that's at the top of the table, because there is loot as well in the PvP game, you still have a risk of losing some of your progression points. And it's kind of punitive in a sense, but they actually had to modify the punitive nature of losing games in the Combat League. And this was to basically allow for players to say, okay, if you lose a game to somebody, you're not necessarily going to just lose all your points or a bunch of them. You can lose minimal points just to say, hey, this is kind of your risk for not winning. But at least they had to make it in a way that it was fair. And so the Dark Zone is a place where all of the fairness, in a sense, is taken away. You go in there, you get some loot, a bunch of guys running, they pop their hives, they hit you with, a shock thingy, or maybe they disarm all of your skills or whatever. They cut your rope and they take your stuff. That's not necessarily something that you can say, how am I going to deal with 4 people? What are the fence lines? What's there to keep the solo player, from actually having to get griefed and losing their progression if they want to engage the game in a solo manner? If they can't find 3 other people to run in the Dark Zone with them, are they going to now be in a position where they're, taking the beating? Are they going to be in a position of being in a disadvantage? And one thing is the Dark Zone already puts you at a disadvantage, and then to be a solo player also puts you more at a disadvantage. So this even resonates more with solo players in the Dark Zone, because the Dark Zone is so dangerous. Solo players pretty much have to kind of navigate in a different way. But the game has come to full maturity, so this stuff doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of you. Some of you are lone wolves. You've gone through all of the hazing and all of the different processes. But I don't know. I think with the way it was structured, we might be seeing a modification of something of a DZ if the Division ever brings out another game. But anyways, I just wanted to go ahead and share my thoughts about this, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. PvP, PvE, what are the reasons that, the PvP experience never necessarily matured past the basics that the developers actually put in? Is it because player participation was not necessarily a big deal, or is it because of the systems and the mechanics, or is it because of the fairness, which was basically taken out, and the lawlessness of the Dark Zone that pretty much, you know, affected player progress and then just caused many players to leave? Let me know in the comment section what you think. Peace out.
Finish him.